Hi everyone, so before I start this video I just wanted to quickly let you know that I have rediscovered my Instagram account after abandoning it for several months. So I'm now posting on there again, and if you'd like to get some slightly more regular updates you can follow me on there. It's at Bethany Ivy, with 2 underscores between Bethany and Ivy. I'll put a link down in the description. That's enough self-promotion, now let's get on with the video. If you saw my last video you might remember me saying that one of my neighbours had almost finished fixing up his boat and it was almost ready to sail. A few weeks ago that happened and we got to go out and sail it. And before I show you the footage I wanted to just give a little bit of background. The boat is called Torval and belongs to my neighbour Nick. The boat is a Beneteau First 30E, I think I got that right. And I believe Nick bought the boat in late 2020. It was in need of some serious TLC by the sound of it. It hadn't been sailed in many years. Sounds like pretty much nothing was working, particularly the engine, which the previous owners I think had given up on completely. Ultimately he did manage to get the engine running. It's now actually running really well. He has rewired a whole bunch of things, installed new instruments. After months and months of work the boat was finally ready to be sailed. We went out for a little test sail on the bay. We ended up with a very full boat. There were 5 of us that went. There was obviously Nick, me, James and his daughter Chloe and Nigel, so all of us crammed onto the boat. We had a really successful little test sail on the bay. The engine worked perfectly, we got the sails up and the boat actually sails really fast. A few days later we went for a longer test sail to a local Anchorage, and we ended up with all of the same people going, but this time divided between 3 different boats. So James and Chloe on their boat, Nigel on his boat, and then me and Nick on Torval. So it ended up being a little bit of an interesting trip. Nigel was having a lot of issues with his engine. He almost didn't make it out of the marina, so he was kind of behind the rest of us, and James ended up sort of waiting for him. Me and Nick ended up going on ahead. It was the first time that we had gone out with just 2 people on the boat, and neither of us has very much experience, but it was fine. We got through the locks with no issue. But then we did end up having a little bit of a blip after we came out of the locks, which which was kind of my fault. I was a bit sleep deprived on this day, which obviously is not ideal if you're going on a sailing trip. For a few nights previously I just hadn't slept very well for one reason or another. So we were motoring alongside the breakwater, having come out of the locks. Nick needed to go below and do some stuff, so he handed me the tiller. I had noticed that there were people up on the wall. What I hadn't quite registered in my sleep-deprived state was that they were fishermen and that they had lines in the water. And the lines were very difficult to see, almost impossible to see because obviously they're so thin, and they were casting the lines out quite a long way. So I was not particularly close to the wall, but suddenly I heard one of the men on the wall sort of like screaming at me, and I couldn't work out what was going on. And it took me a few seconds to register that there was a fishing line wrapped around the lifelines. It wasn't good. I think I just kind of froze for a second, not knowing how to react, and then I was like, Nick! And he came up and we were trying to figure out how to detach this line while this fisherman is still sort of screaming his head off at us. And then the line actually snapped and kind of bounced back to him, so we ended up with the float still stuck on the boat. So I felt like a bit of an idiot, that I was sort of left at the tiller for 5 minutes and managed to get a fishing line wrapped around the boat, but actually there are rules against fishing in that location anyway. There are big signs up there saying no fishing. They really shouldn't have been there. I feel that I should have noticed that they were fishing and twigged that there could be lines in the water, but yeah, I don't think it was entirely my fault. But anyway, yeah, we got away from it with no harm done, but it was a bit stressful and the fishermen were very, very angry. We arrived safely at the Anchorage. James and Nigel actually had caught us up, although Nigel's engine died just as he arrived at the Anchorage, so Nick had to frantically row over there and try to help him get the anchor down. We had a night on the anchor and I was really hoping that I was going to get a really good night's sleep because I was absolutely exhausted. Unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. I don't know if it was just sort of being in an unfamiliar place, all the kind of noises of being on the anchor. You know, I have slept okay on the anchor before, but it wasn't happening this time. In the Anchorage the next day, James and Nick, I think, spent most of the day trying to fix Nigel's engine. They got it kind of sort of working again, but it was a bit flaky because it needed a new part. The following evening we headed back to the marina again. It's Captain Nick. Looking knackered. that Nigel had gone ahead of us, and as we radioed the marina to try and lock in, we were told that there was a broken down boat being towed out of the lock, which turned out to be Nigel, whose engine had died again. But everyone made it back safely since then. Nigel's boat has been fixed, it has had the new part installed, the engine is running fine again, and a few days ago we actually did a trip on Nigel's boat. Me, Nick and Nigel went to meet James and Chloe at Tenby, but actually what ended up happening was the anchorage at Tenby was not suitable for the conditions that we had at the time, so James had moved to anchor at Caldy Island, so we went to join him there. So that was kind of interesting. It was a little bit different than last time. The spot at Caldy was really nice. It was kind of fun to go somewhere a little bit different. When it came to be time to go back to the marina again, the weather conditions were sort of very changeable. There was potential for there to be some pretty big gusts, but on the whole it looked like it should be okay. The trouble was, when we got out there, the conditions were a lot worse than we expected. The waves were much bigger, the wind was a lot stronger, it was sort of continuous 20 knots. None of us, again, was very experienced. We ended up going back to the anchorage. I unfortunately ended up leaving at that point. I was completely soaked, I had no dry clothes at all. I very much felt that I needed to go and get sort of warm and dry and get my clothes washed and stuff, so I abandoned ship at that point and went to stay with my parents for a couple of nights. Nick and Nigel eventually made it back the following day. I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering about the motor controller. I'm not going to give a full update. It has been a lot more complicated than expected to find a compatible controller. There are some out there, but the warranties on them aren't very good and they're incredibly expensive, so it's a little bit of a risk to spend that much money on something that could sort of break after 6 months. I'm being a little bit cautious, hoping something's going to come up. I've realised at this point it's unlikely that my boat is going to be fixed this season, so I'm going to focus on getting experience on other people's boats this year. There's not that much of the sailing season really left. Over the winter I will use that time to get my boat fixed up so that it's ready for the next sailing season. It's unfortunate, but the experience that I have been getting has made me feel a lot more confident about taking my boat out when I eventually do have it fixed up. That's a sort of very brief update. I'll let you know how it goes and see you next time.